Hey guys, tonight we drift back into a palace where the moon hangs fat and golden over black lacquered rooftops, and every torch on the walls shivers in the night wind. You can almost smell the mix of sandalwood smoke and damp stone as you pad quietly through the imperial courtyard. Beyond those carved doors waits a man who refuses to sleep, not because of work, not because of anxiety about tomorrow's war council, but because he's plotting how to never, ever die. You probably won't survive this either, but that's half the fun of history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time where you are. I love seeing who's wide awake with me tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet make no sound as you enter the Emperor's chamber, and there he is, lean, restless, robe half slipped off one shoulder, a stack of bamboo slips at his side. A single oil lamp makes his shadow look impossibly tall against the wall, like he's already halfway to being a god. He's young still, not yet 40, but the lines around his mouth are deep from scowling at court officials who whisper about succession when they think he can't hear. The court astrologer just warned him that his birth star is passing into an unlucky phase, which in this era is basically a death sentence signed by the heavens. You watch him tighten his jaw and mutter that he'll find a way to trick both stars and time. Historians still argue whether that muttered vow was recorded by a scribe or just legend embroidered later, but the story works. Tonight is the pivot point when fear becomes obsession. Out in the palace kitchens, a court alchemist is already grinding cinnabar into a fine, glinting red powder, claiming it will become the first step toward the elixir of life. If you're picturing a medieval pharmacy, good news, you're not far off, though the lab safety here is just not licking your fingers. One servant trips on the threshold and almost scatters the mixture across the floor. You can practically hear the Emperor's breath catch, because losing even a pinch feels like losing time itself. You follow him out onto the open terrace, where a chill breeze flaps the silk banners. He stares at the Milky Way like a man challenging it to blink first. Somewhere in the dark city below, people are sleeping off their rice wine, but here the night is a crucible. You imagine him counting the years he's already ruled, tallying how many friends have died, how many enemies he's outlived. The hush is broken by a distant gong, third watch of the night, and he whispers that death is for lesser men. If this were a movie, thunder would roll right then, but tonight the sky just stays pitilessly clear. A quirky court rumor says he keeps a bronze mirror near his bed and checks it every dawn to see if a single white hair has appeared. It's probably exaggerated, but you can see him doing it, peering anxiously at his own reflection, tugging at his beard. Beneath the silk and jade, he's just a man terrified of turning into the kind of ancestral tablet he lights incense for every morning. The irony doesn't escape you, and you almost want to lean over and say, "Relax, dude. Nobody's figured this out in all of human history." But he wouldn't hear you anyway. He's already summoning the chief eunuch to wake the alchemists and start mixing again. Tonight, you realize, the story isn't just about one man's ego, it's about that universal itch to dodge the ending we all know is coming. The Emperor just has the power, and the treasury, to turn that itch into a national project. Tomorrow, he'll send riders to the coastal provinces to fetch rare herbs, mercury, jade dust, and heaven knows what else. The empire is about to pivot around this man's midnight promise. And you, lucky insomniac listener, get to follow every strange, shimmering, sometimes ridiculous step. You follow the Emperor's thoughts backward, like smoke unraveling to the first spark, and find yourself in a very different setting, a child's playroom layered with bright lacquered toys and carved wooden animals. The boy who will one day glare at the stars is still small enough to trip on his own silk robes. His mother's laughter echoes in the halls, briefly. She will die before his 10th year, leaving the palace strangely hollow. The whispers say it was fever, others mutter poison, and historians still argue whether it was a natural illness or a carefully timed removal by rival factions. Whatever the truth, the boy's first real taste of loss burns hotter than any fire. You crouch closer and watch him sit cross-legged by a bronze incense burner, smoke curling in lazy snakes toward the ceiling. A tutor tries to coax him back to reciting the Analects, but he's fixated on a single question: where did she go? He's told she now dwells in the ancestral hall, but he can't visit except on festival days. Imagine being 10 and finding out you only get to see your mom as a spirit tablet lit by candlelight. No wonder the boy mutters a childish oath that he'll never let death take him too. Outside, the palace gardens hum with cicadas. The boy sneaks away there, crouching behind peony bushes and watching ants build their colonies. He notices that when one ant dies, the others simply carry it away and keep working. It feels both cruel and fascinating, and he wonders if people are the same. Later court diaries claim he once buried a pet cricket and then spent hours trying to dig it back up, just to prove he could undo what the world had done. Maybe it's just palace gossip, but it's the kind of detail you can picture: little hands full of dirt, eyes shining with frustration. By his teens, tutors report that he throws himself into every subject: astronomy, medicine, the classics, not just to impress, but to collect tools against mortality. He's especially obsessed with stories of the 8 immortals and the elusive sages who supposedly found the secret of living forever. There's a joke among the palace staff that the prince doesn't just want to pass the exams of statecraft, he wants to pass the exam of life itself without ever graduating into death. You can't help but smile imagining teenage him staying up late, staring at scrolls by lamplight like a kid binging conspiracy theory videos at 3 a.m. The court astrologer, who serves as a kind of cosmic therapist, once reads his chart and declares that his lifeline is unusually strong. Instead of calming him, it lights a fire under him. Unusually strong isn't enough, he wants unbreakable. So he starts collecting talismans, jade amulets, carved charms, even a tiny gourd said to hold good fortune. Each one he tucks under his pillow at night, building a personal arsenal against fate. Years pass, and the boy becomes a youth who rides out in full ceremonial armor, sunlight flashing off bronze scales. The people cheer, but if you watch closely you notice he glances nervously at the funerary banners in the temple district as he passes. Coronations are supposed to be celebrations of continuity, yet the thought gnaws at him: he is now the single beating heart of a vast machine, and if it stops, the empire shudders. It's almost sweet, this mix of duty and fear. Almost. Because the fear is what will eventually turn court scholars into guinea pigs and mountains into laboratories. But right now, he's just a boy watching the horizon, promising his absent mother and himself that he will find a way to stay. In this twilight of youth, he's like a taut bowstring, ready to launch into history, and into trouble. A quirky palace tale says he once tried to hold his breath for an entire hour, convinced that if he could slow everything down, he could outpace time itself. Naturally, he fainted after a few minutes and had to be revived with vinegar under the nose. If nothing else, the story shows how early he's willing to test the limits of the human body. And you, standing in the shadows, can almost hear the universe chuckle softly, as if to say, "Good luck with that, kid." The palace bells ring, and you find yourself watching the youth step into adulthood, the weight of the crown pressed firmly on his head. The day of his coronation smells of rain-washed stone and incense so thick it clings to your throat. Courtiers line the hall like carved figurines, each one pretending not to be terrified of what this new ruler might do. You watch him kneel before the ancestral tablets, swearing to uphold heaven's mandate. The irony isn't lost on you: he's promising to keep the cycle going while quietly plotting to escape the very cycle he just invoked. The ceremony itself is gorgeous: banners painted with dragons, bronze drums echoing so deep they rattle your ribs, silk-robed dancers moving like ripples across a pond. But beneath the splendor, you can feel him scanning the room, cataloging who's loyal, who's dangerous, and who might one day mention the dreaded word, succession. It's a strange moment: the emperor is now the most powerful person in the empire, yet he looks almost hunted. Historians still argue whether this unease was paranoia or simply the natural pressure of being at the center of everything. Later that night, the celebrations roll on, banquets groaning with roasted duck, mountain delicacies, and wine poured until the torches burn low. Musicians play zither and flutes, but you notice his smile keeps flickering out, like a candle fighting a draft. When an elderly courtier jokes about wishing him 10,000 years, a standard blessing, the emperor suddenly looks very serious, as if taking it literally. He raises his cup, drains it, and sets it down with a thud that makes the room fall quiet for a heartbeat. The message is clear: yes, 10,000 years sounds about right. After the guests leave, he slips away to a quiet courtyard where water lilies float in a moonlit pond. There, he confides in his closest eunuch that he's already ordered the imperial archives searched for every record of longevity recipes, elixirs, and strange cures. This isn't just curiosity, it's policy. The empire's treasury will now fund the search for forever. A quirky moment you wouldn't want to miss: the court painters are instructed to start flattering him in portraits, slightly younger, slightly taller, just a bit more godlike. Imagine scrolling through his official Instagram feed and realizing every new picture looks 5% more divine than the last. It's the original filter culture, and you can't help but smirk at how modern it feels. But for all the theatrics, the emperor still feels the tick of time like a drumbeat under everything. He begins inviting philosophers and doctors to debate in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, where you sit cross-legged on a cushion listening to the arguments. Some say immortality can be reached through virtue, others through secret herbs, and one daring scholar insists it's all nonsense. That man's career ends abruptly, and you make a mental note not to bring up skepticism at court unless you enjoy early retirement, permanently. The first imperial edicts under this new reign include heavy investment in astronomy and medicine, which sounds noble until you realize it's mostly to calculate his lifespan more precisely and find ways to stretch it. Meanwhile, new taxes are levied to fund expeditions for rare minerals and herbs rumored to lengthen life. Out in the provinces, peasants mutter about their labor paying for the emperor's personal science project, but in the capital, the mood is electric. You can almost feel the empire holding its breath, waiting to see if its ruler will pull off the impossible. As you leave the hall, you glance back at him, framed by lantern light. His jaw is set, his eyes bright with something halfway between fear and exhilaration. The night air smells of wet earth and victory wine, and somewhere a nightingale calls. You realize the story has shifted from boyish curiosity to a full-blown national mission. This is the moment where the desire for immortality stops being a private quirk and becomes state policy, an obsession powerful enough to move armies, empty treasuries, and rewrite laws. If you're getting the sense that the ride is about to get much weirder, you're absolutely right. And you're not leaving now. You've got a front-row seat as the emperor's court starts filling with alchemists, philosophers, and more than a few questionable characters who all claim to have the secret of never dying. The court has changed by the time you step back in. The air feels heavier, charged with incense smoke and anticipation. The emperor now holds audience not just with ministers of war and agriculture, but with a brand new parade of characters: robe-swishing Taoist sages, sunburned herbalists, mysterious foreign traders clutching pouches of powder. You settle into a corner cushion and watch this strange congress file in, each one promising they've cracked the code to living forever. The first alchemist of the day bows so low his hat brushes the floor and unfurls a scroll full of esoteric symbols. His plan involves cinnabar, gold filings, and an extremely complicated lunar calendar. Another scholar counters with a gentler approach: breath meditation and grain avoidance, because, apparently, eating rice anchors your soul too close to mortality. Historians still argue whether these early debates were sincere science or just a mix of superstition and opportunism, but either way, the emperor drinks it all in. You catch him smiling when a particularly eccentric mystic brings in a turtle the size of a dinner table, claiming its shell carries cosmic wisdom. The emperor orders the creature housed in a special garden pool, just in case. There's even a rumor that he had its shell measured at dawn and dusk to see if it grew with the movement of the stars. It's the kind of detail you want to file under, strangely adorable, though it's also deeply revealing. He's desperate enough to listen to anyone who offers hope, no matter how odd. The palace now smells like a chemist's nightmare. In one hall, copper cauldrons bubble with shimmering liquids that hiss and spark; in another, dry powders are laid out in precise, geometric patterns like sand mandalas. Servants carry jars of mercury through the corridors as casually as if they were bringing tea, and you instinctively hold your breath walking past. Imagine OSHA showing up here, they'd faint on the spot. It isn't all fraud and fantasy, though. The Emperor also summons serious court physicians, those who've memorized medical classics like the Huangdi Neijing, to argue for balance and moderation. Some recommend focusing on seasonal living, early to bed, early to rise, mindful breathing. You can tell this bores the Emperor, it sounds too much like eat your vegetables. He wants spectacle, transformation, the kind of miracle you can feel tingling in your veins. One of the most entertaining moments comes when two rival alchemists present their findings on the same day. The first claims immortality lies in transmuted gold, the second claims it lies in abstinence and spiritual refinement. The Emperor, with perfect deadpan timing, tells them both to keep working, and assigns them chambers next to each other. Palace gossip claims the shouting matches that followed could be heard across the inner court. You grin, imagining a reality TV confessional cutaway, day 12 in the alchemist's dormitory, and someone just set fire to the curtains again. You notice that every failure, every potion that makes someone ill or every formula that fizzles, is quietly covered up. Eunuchs sweep away the unlucky test subjects, new ones are summoned, and the experiments continue. The empire is turning into one enormous laboratory, and the emperor is willing to risk more than just gold coins to see results. In the evenings, he strolls the gardens with favored sages, quizzing them about the nature of the soul. The moonlight glints on their long beards, and you can hear snatches of conversation about how spirit and body might be separated, purified, and reunited in a perfected form. It's both eerie and strangely poetic. You find yourself thinking that, for all his power, the emperor is just another human pacing the dark, bargaining with the night sky for one more sunrise. By the time you head back to your own imaginary chamber, the palace is buzzing like a beehive. New laboratories are under construction, rare minerals are arriving by caravan, and rumors are spreading in the city that the emperor is close to cracking the secret. Whether that's true or just hype doesn't matter. You can feel it, the hunt for immortality has shifted into overdrive, and no one, least of all you, can look away. The first real disaster hits with a smell you can't quite forget, sharp, metallic, a little like burnt coins. You're standing near the imperial workshop when a servant rushes out, coughing, his face pale as rice paper. Inside, the emperor's prized alchemist is hovering over a steaming cauldron of liquid cinnabar, swearing this will be the elixir that bends death backward. The mixture glows faintly in the lamplight, almost pretty, right up until the moment it isn't. The potion is ladled into a tiny jade cup, and the unlucky volunteer, a junior eunuch who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, kneels and drinks. At first, nothing happens. Then his face flushes bright red, his body trembles, and he collapses. The hall erupts in chaos. The emperor's face stays eerily calm, but you notice his fingers grip the throne rail until his knuckles go white. Historians still argue whether this event was recorded accurately or hushed up entirely, but court rumors insist 3 servants vanished that night, probably silenced to keep word from spreading. What follows is a whirlwind of damage control. The alchemist is quietly reassigned to a remote mountain temple, an elegant way of saying exile, and the emperor personally oversees the disposal of the failed batch. You watch as he pours the glowing liquid into a bronze vessel, then orders it buried deep in the palace garden under a stand of ancient pines. Somewhere under your feet lies the first failed step toward eternity, and you can't help thinking it's a bit like burying hope itself. Quirky palace gossip claims that a stray cat licked some of the spillage and then refused to die for the next 10 years, outliving 3 generations of kitchen staff. It's almost certainly a tall tale, but the emperor keeps the cat around anyway, feeding it scraps of fish and calling it a good omen. You grin, because even in the middle of a crisis, humans will cling to the tiniest scrap of good news, especially if it has whiskers. The scare doesn't stop him. In fact, it has the opposite effect. He doubles the funding for alchemy and orders stricter secrecy. From now on, every experiment must be reported directly to him, and anyone caught leaking information will face punishment severe enough to make everyone gulp. The palace atmosphere thickens with tension. Servants move more quietly, and even the ministers of state are careful with their words, as though one stray phrase might cost them their post, or worse. Meanwhile, the emperor insists on testing a new set of recipes himself. He starts with the mild ones, ginseng infusions, powdered pearls dissolved in wine, teas brewed from rare mountain herbs. You can practically taste the bitter edge of the concoctions as he grimaces and swallows. There's a strange determination in the act, almost heroic, almost reckless. If there's poison in the cup, he seems to think, let it strike him first, he'll wrestle with death personally. At night, he sits by candlelight scribbling notes on bamboo slips, trying to track the effects. Does he feel stronger? Is his pulse steadier? You lean over his shoulder and read a line that says simply, "No dreams tonight." Good sign. He's looking for patterns, even in sleep. The court physicians begin to whisper that his complexion is changing, slightly paler, slightly more intense, as though his blood itself is being rewritten. Some think it's working, others fear it's killing him slowly. You notice how he paces the corridors faster now, more restless, as though daring his body to keep up. A comet streaks across the sky one evening, startling the capital. The astrologers are summoned to interpret it. Some say it's a blessing, others a warning. The emperor declares it a sign that his quest is righteous. You can't help but smirk, because really, what else could he say? Imagine announcing to the entire court, "Bad news, everyone, heaven thinks I'm doomed." Not going to happen. By the end of this chapter of his reign, the emperor has turned fear into momentum. The failed elixir isn't a reason to stop, it's fuel for the fire. More alchemists are hired, more rare minerals are hauled across deserts, more servants are sworn to secrecy. The hunt is back on, and now it feels less like an experiment and more like a crusade. And you, still following silently, know that this is only the beginning of the strange, dangerous road ahead. You step back into the palace just before dawn, and this time the emperor is not in his study but preparing for a journey. His robe is travel plain, his hair tied back with a simple ribbon instead of the usual jeweled crown. The decision has been made, the secret to eternal life won't be found sitting on a throne. You watch as he mounts a palanquin and sets off toward the distant mountains, a train of priests, alchemists, and unlucky ministers trailing like a human comet. The first stop is a famous Taoist peak where mist curls like dragon breath through pine forests. The emperor climbs the stone steps barefoot, as ritual demands, though you can see he's more used to palace slippers than mountain paths. The air smells of moss and wet rock, and every breath feels charged. When he reaches the summit, a group of Taoist sages wait in white robes, each with a long wooden staff. They greet him as the Son of Heaven and lead him into a cavern glowing with lamplight. Inside, the ritual begins, chants echo against the walls, filling the cave with a sound that makes your hair prickle. The emperor kneels as the sages draw talismans on yellow paper, burn them, and mix the ashes into tea. He drinks without flinching. Historians still argue whether this was a sincere religious act or carefully staged political theater, but either way, it has power. You feel it too, the weight of the silence afterward, as though the whole mountain is holding its breath. The pilgrimage doesn't end there. Over the next months, you follow him to coastal shrines where priests claim to have seen immortals walk on the waves, to remote valleys where hermits meditate under waterfalls, to sacred groves where the air is thick with incense and rumor. In one village, a shaman ties red cords around his wrists and whispers that it will bind his soul to his body so tightly that death can't slip it free. The emperor nods solemnly, though you notice he leaves the cords on even after the ritual is over, like someone wearing a hospital bracelet a little too long. Not all the encounters are mystical. At one windswept pass, an eccentric monk with wild hair insists the emperor must abstain from meat and wine for 100 days to purify his spirit. The emperor actually agrees, sending shockwaves through the court kitchens. Imagine the royal chef's face when he's told to serve only millet gruel and wild greens for 3 straight months. You can almost hear him muttering, "This is going to ruin my reputation." The fast becomes a palace obsession. Ministers and courtiers join in to flatter the emperor, shuffling around the halls weak from hunger but smiling bravely. Quirky gossip says one minister was caught sneaking roast duck at midnight and had to meditate for 3 extra days as penance. You laugh softly. Immortality apparently also requires a good sense of humor. The emperor returns from his pilgrimages leaner, sharper, and more convinced than ever that the answer lies out there, somewhere just beyond reach. He orders new temples built in honor of the mountain gods, their courtyards paved with white marble so they glitter under moonlight. He wants heaven to notice the effort, maybe even reward it. The empire now bears the marks of his quest. Whole landscapes are reshaped to match his vision of cosmic harmony. You watch him late one evening as he stands alone before one of these new temples, incense smoke drifting around him. He doesn't speak, just tilts his head back and gazes at the stars, as if waiting for them to blink in acknowledgement. For a moment, he looks less like a ruler and more like a man reaching into the dark, hoping the universe reaches back. The journeys leave him both tired and strangely energized, a paradox you can feel in the way he walks the palace corridors again, faster, more determined. He's tasted mystery and ritual, and now he wants results. If the mountains and their sages can't give him forever, then maybe something crafted with fire, metal, and human ingenuity can. The pilgrimages have turned faith into fuel, and soon, you sense, the experiments will take on a new intensity. By the time you next step into the imperial capital, it's not just the emperor who looks transformed, the city itself has started to mirror his obsession. Entire construction projects are underway, filling the air with the sound of chisels on stone and the groan of timber beams being hoisted into place. The emperor has decided that if his body can't yet live forever, then at least his surroundings should. The first of these monuments is a sprawling mausoleum complex, but don't be fooled by the word mausoleum. This isn't meant to be a grave. It's more like an elaborate insurance policy, a structure so vast and solid that it might trick time into forgetting its owner. You walk through the construction site, past rows of clay bricks, heaps of polished jade tiles, and teams of laborers who've been drafted from every corner of the empire. Historians still argue whether the workforce volunteered or was pressed into service, but the scale of the project is beyond dispute. Each wall is layered thick enough to withstand centuries of storms, and some are painted with murals of celestial scenes, immortal beings floating on clouds, star maps that line up perfectly with the night sky. You can't help but admire the engineering. Water channels are dug to divert floods, secret chambers are tucked beneath the earth. It's half palace, half time capsule, and if you squint, you can see how it might feel like a cheat code for eternity. And then there are the gardens. The emperor orders a garden of eternal spring, a massive walled space filled with rare trees, exotic flowers, and streams redirected from miles away to create artificial lakes. The air smells of fresh earth and magnolia blossoms, and you can hear the croak of frogs as night falls. You almost want to lie down on the grass and stay forever, it's that serene. But of course, serenity isn't really the point. These gardens are symbols, proof that the emperor can bend nature itself into a perpetual bloom. One quirky feature catches your eye, a set of bronze bells tuned to mimic the sounds of wind and water. Legend says the emperor had them installed so he could hear the harmony of the cosmos whenever he walked there at night. You can picture him strolling under lantern light, listening to the bells' soft chiming, convinced he's getting closer to aligning himself with the universe's secret rhythm. The construction projects are as much psychological as architectural. Ministers whisper that the emperor seems calmer when he inspects them, tracing his fingers along the new stone walls as though reassuring himself that at least this will outlast him. Still, you notice his health journals grow more detailed. Every headache, every sleepless night is carefully recorded, a reminder that buildings may endure, but bodies still betray. Of course, not everyone in the empire is thrilled about these massive works. Taxes rise, grain quotas tighten, and farmers grumble that their sweat is buying marble for a ruler who might never die to appreciate it. Some minor rebellions flare in the outer provinces, quickly put down by imperial troops. The emperor barely flinches. The vision of an eternal dynasty is too dazzling to give up now. Even the palace interiors are redesigned, hallways lengthened, chambers brightened, murals repainted with symbols of immortality, cranes, peaches, and pine trees. It's like living inside a giant talisman. You find yourself thinking that if belief alone could hold back death, this might just work. One evening, as the last rays of sun slant across the palace roofs, you catch the emperor standing atop a newly completed watchtower. From up here, the city spreads out like a living map, the walls glowing orange in the sunset. He grips the railing and smiles, just a little, as though reassured that his empire might remain even if everything else falls apart. The moment doesn't last. A messenger arrives with news of another alchemical breakthrough, and the emperor descends the tower at once. The walls and gardens may be magnificent, but they are still only stage dressing. His real focus remains unchanged, finding a way to keep walking those gardens not just this season, but every season, forever. You can smell the palace kitchens before you even see them, steam rising from clay stoves, spices sharp enough to sting your nose, and a faint metallic tang from the latest experimental brews. The emperor has decided that if immortality can't be found in stone or ritual, maybe it can be cooked, chewed, and swallowed. You slip inside and watch the head chef bow low before setting a dish on the table that looks equal parts gourmet and dangerous. The menu now reads like a mix between fine dining and a chemistry experiment. Instead of ordinary rice, there are grains soaked in dew collected at dawn. Instead of plain wine, there's wine mixed with powdered jade or crushed pearls. Yes, you heard that right, he's drinking literal gemstones. Historians still argue whether this was believed to nourish the body or simply to impress the court, but either way, the emperor swallows every sip like it's liquid time. Then come the fasting regimens. The emperor declares that grain clouds the spirit and orders entire periods of abstention. For days he lives on nothing but immortal broth, a thin soup of rare herbs that smells faintly like wet moss. You can see the palace staff wilting under the strain of preparing these carefully measured meals. Some of the eunuchs grow so thin they look like reeds swaying in the wind, but no one dares complain. Quirky palace gossip claims that at one point the emperor tried a diet consisting only of pine needles and honey for a month, inspired by stories of legendary hermits. The result? He reportedly broke his fast by devouring 3 roasted pheasants in one sitting. You can't help but chuckle, so much for transcending earthly cravings. But the kitchens aren't just about deprivation, they also become a playground for invention. Chefs create longevity pastries shaped like cranes and peaches, symbols of long life, and serve them at festivals to keep morale high. The emperor sometimes invites scholars to dine with him and quiz them about their health philosophies between courses. You sit nearby, listening to a Confucian argue that moderation is the real key to long life while an alchemist insists that true immortality can only come from ingesting rare metals. You glance at the emperor's plate and notice he's doing both, nibbling a peach pastry while eyeing the next round of mercury-laced pills. There's a strange intimacy to these meals. Each bite feels like a gamble, and you can sense the emperor listening to his own heartbeat, waiting to see if he feels different, stronger, clearer, more godlike. Some nights he paces the corridor afterward, touching his pulse at his neck and murmuring notes to the court scribe. The palace begins to run on 2 clocks, the normal hours of state business, and the private schedule of meals, fasts, and secret tastings that might unlock forever. Out in the city, word of these diets spreads like wildfire. Ordinary people begin copying imperial habits, grinding pine nuts into porridge or skipping grain altogether, hoping to catch a little of the emperor's good fortune. It's the ancient equivalent of a viral health trend, and you imagine shopkeepers rubbing their hands together at the sudden spike in herb sales. Yet, despite all the careful planning, there are mishaps. One summer, an especially potent batch of longevity wine makes half the kitchen staff violently ill. The emperor, furious, orders stricter quality control but refuses to abandon the recipe. He simply decrees that next time, he'll drink first. You can't decide if that's brave or just very, very stubborn. By the end of the season, the emperor's body has changed, his frame leaner from the fasting, his eyes shining with a strange intensity. Whether it's health or obsession you're seeing is hard to say, but one thing is clear, food has become another battlefield in the war against death. The next step will take the fight out of the kitchen and into the very structure of the court itself. The palace feels different now, quieter, tighter, as if invisible threads have been strung across every corridor. You notice new faces in the shadows, eunuchs who don't just fetch scrolls but linger in doorways, listening. The emperor has decided that his quest for immortality needs protection, not just from disease or bad luck, but from gossip, betrayal, and sabotage. And so, the secret bureau is born. It starts small, a handful of trusted servants tasked with keeping the alchemical experiments hidden from prying eyes. Soon, though, it grows into a full network. Spies are dispatched to monitor courtiers, to sniff out anyone laughing too loudly about the emperor's diets, or whispering that maybe forever isn't possible. You catch one of these agents slipping through a hidden door, carrying a scroll sealed with the imperial dragon. The message, you suspect, contains the fate of some unfortunate gossip. Historians still argue whether this secret police was truly efficient or just fed the emperor what he wanted to hear, but there's no doubt that fear spreads through the court like ink on silk. Ministers speak more carefully, scholars bow lower, and even the alchemists learn to triple-check their recipes before presenting them. One eccentric philosopher who dares to call the search for immortality a distraction from virtue is quietly reassigned to a distant province. You never hear from him again. Quirky palace gossip says the emperor had a network of hidden tunnels built under the palace so he could slip between laboratories unnoticed. Some servants swear they heard footsteps in the night where no one should be walking. You imagine him down there, robes brushing the damp stone, carrying a lamp as he checks on bubbling cauldrons personally, like a ghost haunting his own palace. This tightening grip isn't just about secrecy, it's also about control. The emperor begins keeping meticulous records of every experiment, every dose, every dream. He instructs scribes to log his pulse, his digestion, even the color of his tongue each morning. It's a surveillance state aimed inward, with his own body as the primary suspect. You sit in on one of the private councils where punishments are decided. A minor official is accused of selling counterfeit, longevity pills, to gullible merchants outside the capital. The emperor listens, face unreadable, then orders the man publicly shamed. It's not just justice, it's theater. The message is clear, only the emperor controls the gateway to forever. But this climate of secrecy has side effects. Alchemists compete more fiercely, hiding their notes from one another, sometimes sabotaging rivals. You overhear two arguing in hushed voices in a corridor, one accusing the other of stealing a mercury recipe, the other hissing that it was flawed anyway. You can't help thinking it's starting to look like a very deadly reality show. And yet, despite the tension, there's also a strange camaraderie among those closest to the emperor. Late at night, you watch them gather in the Hall of Mental Cultivation, poring over star charts, sharing wine, whispering about which mountain might hold the next clue. They've become a secret society, bound together by the promise of cheating death. The emperor seems both more isolated and more driven than ever. You catch him on the palace balcony one evening, looking out at the city lights with a faint smile, as though reassured that no one dares challenge his vision. Beneath the smile, though, there's a flicker of exhaustion. All the secrecy, the spies, the constant vigilance, it's keeping him alive, but it's also wearing him down. As you leave the chamber, you can feel the palace breathing differently now, quieter, more watchful, as though every wall has ears. The quest for immortality is no longer just an experiment, it's a state secret, a project that could topple reputations and kingdoms if mishandled. You know the next stage will demand even more of him, because when you build a world this controlled, there's no turning back. The palace may be quiet, but you can feel the pressure mounting like a storm waiting to break. Every ticking water clock reminds you that time is still moving forward, no matter how many elixirs the emperor drinks. This is the era when dissent starts to bubble up, not with riots or open defiance, but with carefully phrased memorials and polite coughs during council meetings. You sit in on an imperial audience where a court physician kneels, forehead pressed to the floor, and gently suggests that perhaps the emperor's fasting schedule has grown too severe. The room goes dead silent, like someone just insulted the sun. The emperor listens, nods once, then orders the man to take his own pulse and report back on how long he thinks he will live. The physician's hands shake as he obeys. Historians still argue whether this exchange was meant as a joke or a warning, but no one else raises the topic of fasting again for months. Meanwhile, trials begin to pop up in the palace like weeds after rain. A failed alchemist is accused of treachery, his immortality powder blamed for making the emperor ill for 3 days. You are present for his interrogation, a tense, candlelit affair where he insists the dose was correct and claims that the emperor simply didn't follow the regimen properly. It's the ancient version of a user error excuse, and it doesn't go over well. The verdict is swift, the punishment harsh. These spectacles serve a purpose beyond justice, they keep the rest of the court in line. You watch ministers exchange glances, suddenly very interested in keeping their advice vague. Some start padding their reports with phrases like, perhaps, and, it is said, anything to soften the blow of bad news. The palace is becoming a place where no one wants to be the messenger. But there are quieter rebellions too. You catch sight of a Confucian scholar leaving a secret note in the sleeve of a visiting envoy, warning foreign powers that the empire is sick with dreams of eternity. Whether this is treason or compassion, you can't quite decide. What you do know is that he vanishes within a week, and the note never reaches its destination, or maybe it does, because suddenly you hear rumors that rival kingdoms are mocking the emperor behind closed doors. Quirky palace gossip claims that some courtiers start wearing charms of their own, not for immortality, but for protection against the emperor's increasingly volatile moods. Little bronze amulets of tigers or turtles are tucked into sleeves, just in case divine luck is the only shield they have left. At night, you walk past the Hall of Clocks, where timepieces click and drip, marking the hours. The emperor visits this hall often now, standing among the devices as though trying to stare time into submission. You imagine him listening to the sound of water trickling through the clepsydra, thinking, one day, I will not have to hear this anymore. Even the common people begin to notice the strain. When the emperor appears at public ceremonies, some whisper that he looks pale, thinner, and others whisper that he seems godlike, glowing with purpose. Historians still debate which version is closer to the truth, but either way, the sight of him sets the tone for the empire. If he looks strong, hope rises; if he looks frail, anxiety spreads. The tension begins to seep into your own bones. Every meal feels like a test, every knock on the door like a summons. And yet, you sense that this pressure is sharpening the emperor's resolve rather than weakening it. He is convinced that the answer is close, that a breakthrough is just one ritual or one rare ingredient away. The next step, he decides, is to widen the search, not just within his borders, but far beyond them. The call goes out across mountains, deserts, and seas, bring the emperor anything that promises life beyond life. Suddenly the court is awash with strange faces, envoys from distant lands, merchants smelling of salt and spices, sailors with sunburnt cheeks. You stand by the gates as their caravans roll in, laden with jars, powders, dried roots, and animals you can't even name. It's like watching an ancient version of an international health expo, except the stakes are much, much higher. One delegation from the West claims to carry a resin that can seal the soul inside the body. It looks suspiciously like tree sap, but the emperor listens with rapt attention, nodding as the translator speaks. Another envoy brings a live tortoise said to be over 200 years old. The emperor orders that it be kept in a private garden, fed the choicest greens, and studied daily. You can almost hear the court scholars debating whether this turtle holds the secret to eternity or is simply just a very lucky reptile. Historians still argue whether these foreign remedies were taken seriously by the emperor or simply used as tools for diplomacy. What is certain is that they add new layers to his obsession. Soon, the imperial kitchens are boiling down exotic herbs from lands so far away that just pronouncing their names feels like a journey. The scent of cinnamon, frankincense, and dried limes begins to mingle with the old, familiar smell of pine needles and ginseng. Quirky palace gossip says that one day, a sailor brought in a strange sea creature, something like a jellyfish, that was dried and powdered to make a potion of endless youth. The result was so slimy that even the emperor grimaced before swallowing it, then announced that it tasted like destiny. You suppress a laugh. maybe destiny tastes a little like low tide. The influx of foreign goods also sparks tension. The alchemists of the court resent these outsiders, grumbling that their own work is being ignored in favor of novelties from across the seas. One alchemist even accuses an envoy of being a spy sent to poison the emperor rather than prolong his life. A trial is held, the envoy is cleared, and the alchemist is dismissed, proof that the emperor's trust is no longer unconditional, even for his oldest advisors. At night, you watch ships leave the harbor, carrying imperial envoys on return journeys. They are under strict orders: find anything, mineral, plant, or ritual, that might offer even the faintest promise of stalling death. You imagine them scouring foreign markets, bargaining with mystics, risking storms at sea. It's almost romantic, except you know the price of failure could be fatal. The court itself begins to feel like a laboratory of the world. You see African ivory used in charms, Indian sandalwood burned in rituals, Persian mercury added to elixirs. Each experiment is carefully logged, though you suspect half the ingredients are now being mixed together just to see what happens. There's a sense of momentum, as though the empire is inhaling all the wisdom of the known world and holding its breath for the result. Even the common people catch the fever of curiosity. Markets in the capital start selling foreign longevity snacks, dried figs, rare teas, strange spices. Children chase after the tortoise keeper just to get a glimpse of the creature that supposedly holds the emperor's secret. It becomes part spectacle, part obsession, a national pastime of waiting to see if this next thing will work. But still, you notice the emperor aging. His hair, once dark as lacquer, now shows threads of silver, and his posture is a little more stooped. It's as though time itself is mocking him, reminding him that no amount of cinnamon, mercury, or turtle soup can hold the clock still forever. You sense that the next move he makes will not just be about science or magic, it will be about convincing the entire empire that he is already more than mortal. You can feel the change before the first drums even sound. The emperor has decided it's time to put on a show, a grand one, and make the entire empire believe that his quest for immortality is working. You find yourself swept into preparations for a spectacle unlike anything the palace has ever seen. Lanterns are strung across the courtyards, musicians rehearse until their fingers ache, and carpenters hammer together temporary stages that will turn the city into one enormous theater. When the festival begins, you stand among thousands of citizens crammed into the main square. The air smells of incense and roasted chestnuts, and the hum of the crowd is almost electric. Suddenly the emperor appears, robed in white silk embroidered with cranes, the symbol of eternal life. Gasps ripple through the crowd. His entrance is slow, deliberate, and you realize he's not just walking, he's staging a miracle. The rituals start with sacrifices of jade and silk to the heavens, followed by elaborate dances meant to mimic the motion of the stars. Priests chant, beating drums in a rhythm that seems to slow time itself. You can feel your heart sinking with it, as though the entire crowd is breathing in unison. Historians still argue whether this was a sincere religious ritual or a carefully planned PR stunt, but standing here, you feel the power of it either way. Then come the displays of proof. A court alchemist presents a vial of glittering liquid, claiming it has already extended the emperor's life. The emperor drinks it in front of everyone, smiling faintly, and the crowd erupts in cheers. You glance around and see people nodding, whispering to each other that he looks younger already. It's the ancient equivalent of a viral TikTok moment, except the stakes are the emperor's eternal image. Quirky palace gossip says that during one of these festivals, a hidden stage trick was used to make the emperor appear to glow under moonlight, perhaps polished mirrors reflecting torchlight, perhaps something more mysterious. Whatever the trick, the effect is stunning. He seems otherworldly, more deity than man. You half expect him to float right off the platform. But the spectacle isn't just for the citizens, it's for the court, too. Ministers who have been quietly doubting the emperor's obsession now find themselves swept up in the pageantry. You watch them bow lower, praise louder, as though hypnotized by the scale of it all. It's harder to argue with a man who can command the stars to dance, even if you know it's all carefully staged. Children in the crowd begin imitating the ritual dances, spinning in circles and laughing. Merchants shout about selling, blessed, food from the festival, claiming it will keep you healthy all winter. You realize this is more than entertainment, it's shaping culture. The emperor isn't just seeking immortality anymore, he's branding himself as the immortal emperor. Yet, beneath the drums and cheers, you notice a faint tension. Some elders in the crowd exchange skeptical looks, their faces tight. You overhear one mutter that no human can cheat death, no matter how grand the ceremony. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps they are simply jealous. Either way, you sense that not everyone is convinced. When the final ritual ends, fireworks light up the night sky, yes, real fireworks, the palace's latest invention, booming and scattering sparks like tiny falling stars. The crowd roars, children squeal, and for a moment the emperor's dream feels complete. You can almost believe he has found the key to living forever. As the smoke clears, though, you catch sight of the emperor turning away, his face suddenly tired, the glow gone. He has pulled off the illusion, yes, but he knows it can't last forever. The next step, you sense, will not just be spectacle. It will be something more personal, more desperate, and much, much riskier. The air is heavy with river mist tonight, the kind that beads on your eyelashes and makes every torch flare seem haloed. You're standing on the banks, staring at a row of silver boats floating silently on the dark water, each one glinting like a piece of the moon fallen to earth. This is not a public festival, this is a secret rite, attended only by the emperor, his closest alchemists, and a handful of guards who have been sworn to silence. The boats are arranged in a perfect crescent, forming what looks like a shining pathway across the water. Each vessel carries a brazier filled with glowing embers and a small altar stacked with offerings, peaches, grains of rice, and vials of shimmering elixirs. The emperor steps onto the first boat, robes trailing behind him, and you follow carefully, feeling the wood shift under your feet. Tonight's ceremony is meant to summon the favor of the celestial immortals. The alchemists chant as the boats are slowly pushed from the shore, drifting into the middle of the river. The sound of the oars is soft, almost reverent. You catch the faint metallic scent of mercury coming from one of the bowls, and you can't help but wonder if breathing this air is safe. Historians still argue whether this ritual actually happened or if later storytellers embellished it into a legend. Some say the boats were set ablaze at the end, floating like fiery ghosts downstream. Others insist they were left to drift silently into the night, carrying the emperor's prayers with them. Either way, it becomes one of the most haunting images in imperial memory, the ruler of all under heaven standing alone under the stars, daring the universe to deny him. The emperor raises a cup and drinks, his silhouette outlined by firelight. For a moment, the entire river seems to hold its breath. You feel the hairs on your arms rise, something about this night feels different, charged. Even the frogs along the shore have gone quiet, as if nature itself is watching. Quirky palace gossip later claims that during this ceremony, the emperor swore he saw a shooting star streak across the sky and took it as a sign that the gods had accepted his offering. Whether true or not, the story spreads quickly through the court and becomes proof, at least to his supporters, that he is chosen. But there is a cost. As the night wears on, you notice the emperor's face grow pale, sweat glistening at his temples. The elixirs he has consumed are potent, maybe too potent, and by the time the boats return to shore, he is leaning heavily on his attendants. Still, he smiles, a small, satisfied smile, like a gambler who knows the dice have finally landed his way. Back in the palace, word of the ceremony leaks despite the secrecy. Ministers whisper that something has changed. Some say the emperor now walks with renewed vigor, that his skin looks smoother, his eyes brighter. Others mutter that his temper has grown shorter, that he sleeps even less, pacing the corridors at night as though chasing an invisible shadow. You lie awake, thinking of those boats glowing on the water, wondering if tonight was a turning point. The emperor seems more determined than ever, convinced that immortality is within reach. But you can't shake the image of his trembling hands as he stepped back onto the shore. Something is coming, something that will test whether all of this has been worth it. Morning comes late these days, or maybe it just feels that way because the emperor never truly sleeps anymore. You find him pacing the hall of clocks again, but this time there's no fire in his step, no triumphant gleam in his eye. His hands tremble slightly as he examines a water clock, watching the droplets fall one by one, each a reminder that time has not been stopped after all. The signs have been creeping in for months. His once steady voice cracks during audiences. He coughs more often, waving attendants away with a stubborn shake of the head. You notice the court scribes writing down his words with extra care now, as if afraid each decree might be his last. Historians still argue whether this was a slow poisoning from mercury-laced elixirs or simply the wear of age, but either way, the body he has tried so hard to perfect is betraying him. The court physicians are summoned daily. They measure his pulse, his tongue color, the rhythm of his breathing. They offer new remedies, hot springs, acupuncture, even more refined elixirs, but each attempt seems to bring only temporary relief. The emperor grows thinner, his cheekbones sharp enough to cast shadows. You can feel the panic creeping into the palace. Quirky palace gossip says that one desperate night he ordered the clock stopped, commanding that time itself must pause until I am well again. The servants obeyed, silencing every dripping clepsydra, but of course the sun still rose, and the emperor had to face another day. He does not stop working, though. Instead, he doubles down, demanding more research, more experiments, more rituals. You sit in on a midnight council where he outlines a plan to build a new retreat far from the capital, an isolated sanctuary where he can continue his quest without distraction. Ministers nod, but you can see the fear in their eyes. They know that if the emperor leaves the city for too long, power struggles will erupt like weeds in an untended garden. The pressure mounts on everyone. The alchemists whisper about a final, ultimate elixir, a pill of pure gold and cinnabar that will either grant eternal life or kill instantly. Some plead for caution, others argue that there's no time left for half measures. The emperor listens to them all, silent, until at last he nods. You feel your stomach knot. The decision has been made. When the day comes, the entire palace seems to hold its breath. The pill is presented on a jade dish, gleaming in the candlelight like a miniature sun. The emperor takes it without ceremony, swallows, and sits perfectly still. Minutes drag on, and you can hear every shuffle, every cough in the room. Then his face flushes red, and he grips the armrest of his throne. For a terrifying moment, you think he might collapse right there. But he does not. He straightens slowly, breath shallow, and declares that he feels stronger already. The ministers bow, shouting praises, and the court erupts in forced celebration. Yet later that night, you see him clutching his stomach, doubled over in pain, and you realize the cost of this last gamble may yet come due. Even the city outside feels different, quieter, tense. People watch the palace walls as though they can sense the struggle happening inside. Some pray for the emperor's recovery, others whisper that no man can fight heaven's will. You lie awake, wondering whether he has gained even a single extra day, or if he has traded many away for one more illusion of control. The emperor's body is now the calendar everyone reads, his health the empire's clock. And soon, one way or another, that clock will strike. The end, when it comes, is not announced with fanfare or bells but with the quiet closing of a lacquered door. You are there, in the dim light of the hall of mental cultivation, as the emperor sits slumped against a carved screen, his breath shallow but steady. Around him, the court is frozen, unwilling to move until he speaks. When he does, his voice is soft, almost amused. He orders the scribes to record that the search for immortality is not yet finished, that future generations must continue it. It's a strange command, halfway between a scientific directive and a royal decree. Historians still argue whether these were really his words or a later invention meant to save face, but either way, the message survives. The dream of living forever does not die with him. The palace is plunged into ritual. Ministers bow, eunuchs weep, and alchemists burn their notes in shame or fear. You watch the great bronze gates shut as the court enters mourning. The emperor is gone, but his obsession lingers like incense smoke, clinging to the rafters. Quirky palace gossip claims that some of the emperor's closest attendants continued to test elixirs in secret for years after his death, hoping to prove that he had been right all along. A few even swore they saw him in dreams, urging them to keep going. Whether this was guilt, loyalty, or just too much mercury in the bloodstream, you'll never know. Outside the palace, the people react in their own ways. Some mourn sincerely, others mutter that perhaps now the empire can breathe again. The great question becomes, what did it all mean? Was he mad, or was he a visionary centuries ahead of his time? You find yourself standing on the same balcony where he once stared out at the city lights, thinking how fragile and short human lives really are. And then you realize that in a way, he did win. His story has lasted far longer than his body. His name is still spoken, his experiments still debated, his dreams still alive in every person who has ever wished for just one more day. Maybe immortality was never about living forever, maybe it was about being remembered. As the court returns to its routines and the next ruler takes the throne, you take one last slow walk through the palace. The gardens he built are still blooming, the walls he raised still stand. You pause by the turtle in the private courtyard, yes, it's still alive, and smile. Time moves on, but some things endure. You turn away, letting the last image of the emperor drift into memory. Somewhere, a water clock begins to drip again, steady and calm, marking a world that is still spinning. And now, as we step back from the marble halls and the echo of dripping water, let yourself exhale slowly. The torches in the palace corridors have burned low, the river outside is quiet again, and the silver boats are long gone downstream. Picture the emperor's vast empire fading into moonlight, its towers and gardens soft and far away, until all that's left is a single lantern flickering gently in the dark. Your shoulders relax. The tension of court life melts away, as though someone has finally opened a window and let the night air in. The emperor's struggle, so fierce and urgent, becomes just another story carried on the wind, one that has been told and retold for centuries, passed from voice to voice until it reached you tonight. You lie back, imagining that endless sky above the boats on the river, stars scattered like powdered salt. The world feels wide, quiet, and strangely safe, as though time itself has slowed just enough for you to breathe deeply. You think about how short human lives really are, but also how powerful a single dream can be, powerful enough to echo across 2,000 years and keep you awake tonight, listening. So close your eyes now. Let the river carry the last scraps of palace gossip away. Let the drums and chants and whispers of immortality fade into nothing but the soft hum of your own room. You are safe, you are warm, and the night has settled around you like a heavy velvet curtain. Sleep well, traveler. Tomorrow will come soon enough.